Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. I've said this many times on this platform, many times, and it is true. And the reason for why the country is a failed state, we have failed to govern ourselves. Many people in Zimbabwe will not even dare ask themselves, why are we a failed state? This is the really big surprise. But that must be asked. After 44 years of independence, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That is at the heart of our problem. We have those in power today who believe they have the right to rule. This is nothing new. That is part of the process of good governance, of being able to rule yourself. If you've got individuals with that mentality, what do? How do you solve the problem? And clearly, we have failed to solve it because 44 years after independence, in this day and age, we are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. The consequences to being a failed state. Here is a video clip of somebody talking on some of the consequences of being a failed state.
Africa's politics have fallen into the hands of elites as these people just do what the colonialists did, which was suck the wealth out and shift it overseas. World Bank says between 60 and 70% of Africa's capital shifted out of the continent. It's in banks in Europe. So there's this mentality which I think has allowed a very small group of people to take over those countries politically, but also economically. And until that changes, that is, until there's a new generation or even a revolution that actually takes power back to African people, I think those problems, that lack of development, will continue.
Well, if the truth be said, after 44 years, that a revolution has not happened in Zimbabwe, at least. We are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. I've got on the screen there the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. She has since been promoted to Attorney General. During a term as chairperson of the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, she was there for about 7 years. Let's be honest, she accomplished very little. Corruption in Zimbabwe is rampant. In this article, she's saying that the commission was going to follow up on last year's Al Jazeera Gold Mafia documentary. A documentary in any other country with a political will to stamp out corruption, the day it was aired, the following day, the prison cells would have been full. those people responsible, named in the documentary, would have been arrested straight away. Her comment was that the commission was following on it. Well, as far as I know, they're still following on it because no arrests have been made. Last week, she was in the paper talking of Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission has identified cash and properties worth 7 billion US dollars in the UK, the USA, Singapore, Hong Kong, Spain, and many other countries outside Zimbabwe. So the gentleman was talking about how Africa's resources is being shipped out of the country. He's absolutely 100% right. The question is, why have we failed to govern ourselves? I think the answer to that is very simple. We have got what I can only call a ghetto mentality. We think of the here and now. We don't think about tomorrow. We don't think about anybody else. We only think about me, here, and now. If I meet my needs now, tomorrow can take care of itself. It is often said that one can take somebody out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto mentality out of some people. Good governance requires that people should think of others, should think of tomorrow. Your rights, your freedom, your prosperity is only guaranteed in the context of the society, the country prospering. But when you have got this ghetto mentality, forget that. That's not going to happen. That is the problem. We do not see beyond the immediate needs. So when you're talking of parties, you talk of it in terms of a tribe. I belong to ZANU-PF, and ZANU-PF must rule. Yes, it may be in the interests of the individual Mugabe or Mnangagwa to stay in power, but is it in the interest of the country? That is a quantum leap that many failed to make. In 2017, when the military staged the coup, and many people came out in the streets in their thousands in support of the coup. Why? Because they wanted Mugabe to go. Yes, it was in the interests of everyone that Mugabe should go. But a broader, if we'd opened our eyes a bit wider and not have this tunnel vision, would have seen that as much as Mugabe was the problem, it was also the system. The dictator was the problem, but the dictatorship, the bigger picture, the dictatorship was the problem. And so instead of saying, no, we want the dictatorship to be dismantled, we just focused on the dictator. And what did we get? All we did is remove one dictator and a few people around him and replace him with another dictator. And nothing has changed. Soon after that military coup, there was a concerted effort by the ghetto-minded, the ghetto mentality populace, campaigning that we should give Mnangagwa a chance. A chance to do what? As long as he's operating in a dictatorship, that is not in the national interest. The here and now is removing Mugabe, yes, but they've got to think of tomorrow. Tomorrow means we have got to have a good foundation of good governance. And that could only mean we must dismantle the dictatorship. The same applied throughout since the late 1990s. The people of the Zimbabwe clearly understood that ZANU-PF was not going to be removed from office as long as it's able to rig the elections. Their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country was being usurped by the regime's ability to rig elections. So there was need to implement democratic reforms to restore the people's fundamental freedoms and rights, including specifically the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And so people have risked life and limb to elect Morgan Tsvangirai and company into office. The tragedy is, as soon as Morgan Tsvangirai and company got anywhere near power, the ghetto mentality kicked in big time. They only looked at me here and now. I am now in a position of power. And Mugabe was very quick to offer them ministerial cars, generous salaries, and for Morgan Tsvangirai himself, a $4 million mansion with their here and now needs taken care of. It's no surprise that they forgot about the reforms. 5 years, they failed to implement even one token reform. It is interesting also to note that the MDC had their supporters ignored all that. All they cared about is that our party should win, our leader should be president. And they forgot the bigger picture, the need for reforms. And this is why, even today, when you try to explain to those people that MDC sold out by failing to implement the democratic reforms, but they had the golden opportunity to do so, it's water off a duck's back. All they care about is that one of their own tribe, their party should be in power. It's not about Chamisa or Mnangagwa, ZANU-PF or Triple C. This is about Zimbabwe, the bigger picture. And as long as we continue to have this mentality, this ghetto mentality of only thinking of here and now, me, I don't think Zimbabwe will be able to govern itself. Last year, the opportunity to force the regime to implement the reforms so that they are free, fair, and credible elections was once again wasted. Why? Because Chamisa and company knew there was an opportunity for them to participate, win some of those few seats that ZANU-PF was offering as bait. Here and now was taken care of, and that is what mattered. And their followers, they enticed them to participate in those flawed elections, even when they've been warned that these elections will not produce any meaningful political change. They accepted Chamisa's word that Triple C would win big, and that Chamisa had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. They didn't even have the common sense themselves to say, how could you have plugged the vote rigging loopholes when Mnangagwa is even boasting that he's frog marching the voters? How could they have plugged the vote rigging loopholes when there is not even a verified voters roll? But all that doesn't matter. The focus is Chamisa is our leader and we want him in power. And if he says he's going to get into power, he's going to win big, we believe him. The ghetto mentality had closed in. As long as you've got an electorate with such a ghetto mentality, they can't even differentiate between their left hand and right hand. The country is never going to have free, fair, and credible elections. Right now, we are looking at 2028. ZANU-PF has not implemented any reforms to make sure that the next elections are free, fair, and credible. And the party clearly has no intention of doing so. And the opposition, whatever of the Triple C opposition is still in power, clearly have no intention of pushing for reforms. But what we can be certain of is they will be participating in 2028 elections without any reforms. And as long as you keep on participating in these flawed elections and gives ZANU-PF legitimacy, the situation will never change. We need citizens in Zimbabwe who have got an open mind, who are willing to stand up and say, no, no, no. Let's have a political system in which every citizen of Zimbabwe has a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That should not be negotiable. That should be a right for everybody, not just a right for ZANU-PF and its supporters, or Chamisa and its supporters. That should be a right for everybody. And we should be fighting for it as a necessary requirement for good governance. Good governance will benefit everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a ZANU-PF supporter or a Triple C supporter. If there's good governance, you too will benefit. free, fair, and credible elections are a prerequisite for good governance. So we should all be fighting for it. But what is stopping us fighting for it is our narrow, blinkered approach. All we want to see is Chamisa elected. And we don't even see when he's deliberately misleading us. All we want to see is Mnangagwa stay in power. And we don't even see when he is deceiving us. It is not only those opposition supporters who should be outraged that ZANU-PF rigged the 2023 elections. Even ZANU-PF supporters must be outraged by that. Because as much as you may have voted for Mnangagwa last year, if he rigged the elections, if you should decide in 2028, for instance, that you don't want him, you will still not be able to replace him because he will rig the elections. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And it is a failed state because we have failed to govern ourselves. It is shocking that even after 44 years, there are many Zimbabweans out there who have not even asked themselves, why are we in such a sorry state? Why are we failing to govern ourselves? There are even fewer who have dared to admit themselves that we are a failed state. Whether you bury your head in the sand and pretend that Zimbabwe is doing fine, the truth of the matter is Zimbabwe is not doing fine at all. Zimbabwe is sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss. Every opportunity lost to put the house in order, the nation will pay for it because it will take even longer to get out of the hole that we've dug ourselves into. Corruption is rampant, absolutely rampant. $7 billion that the ZACC claims they've identified, $7 billion US dollars, could have done a lot for Zimbabwe. But I can tell you now, the 7 billion is only the ears of the hippo of the amount of money that is being looted by this regime. That Al Jazeera that she's talking about there in that picture, they identified that 80% of Zimbabwe's $2 billion gold operations in Zimbabwe per year is being smuggled out of the country. 80%, that is 1.6 billion US dollars. No nation can afford that. And it is not only gold that is being smuggled out, diamonds, lithium, and many, many other resources. Zimbabwe cannot afford that. How long are we going to allow this to continue? Nations get the government they deserve, whether we like to admit it or not. We have got this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanuppi of dictatorship, complete with its equally corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless MDC-CCC opposition. The question is, when are we going to wake up and put this right? Before I go, I'll just play that a video clip again.
Africa's politics have fallen into the hands of elites, as these people just do what the colonialists did, which was suck the wealth out and shift it overseas. World Bank says between 60 and 70% of Africa's capital shifted out of the continent. It's in banks in Europe. So there's this mentality which I think has allowed a very small group of people to take over those countries politically, but also economically. And until that changes, that is, until there's a new generation or even a revolution that actually takes power back to African people, I think those problems, that lack of development, will continue.
Do not agree with that more. We really have to get out of this ghetto mentality, or we are sunk. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.